conservatives are naive a little bit. They think, you know, the truth will win out and that we don't have to fight 24/7 round the clock because we're right. We have the truth on our side. But the flaw in that theory is that the other side is fighting round the clock, 24/7, and they are working to undermine us around the clock. And if we just weigh in every 4 years and say, oh yeah, we're going to throw a few things out there and we'll win out because the truth will come forward. The truth is getting smothered, and it's the permanent campaign. They used to talk about that 20, 30 years ago, but it's truly a permanent campaign with this big network of left-wing dark money and these NGOs and all these groups that are formed to do specific tasks. And, one of the tasks is language.
How you doing, Culminators? Thanks again for joining us. This is a completely new thing, but it's a great thing, and it's something I wish I would have thought of myself. I guess I kind of have thought of it myself, but not the way these guys have done it. We do have a lot of content on this podcast where people talk about how language has been stolen. Words have been stolen. In fact, this is something before podcasting that I really even started writing about in the context of trademarks, where people would try to take slogans or own parts of the English language and remove them from common usage. This is a completely different concept, though. This is something that I really was first schooled on by the Rhetor of York, Eric Smith, and subsequently discussed with James Lindsay, the way Marxists steal words. And when I say Marxists, I mean liberals and the Democratic Party and activists in particular. I was discussing this with our good friend of the podcast, the lovely and talented Grace Riley, who had been working with Restoration of America, an organization that I knew and still know not all that much about. And she told me about something called the Language Watch program. And what they've done is put up a series of 1-minute videos that demonstrate, you can read it, why many phrases commonly used in the culture are politically loaded and more like propaganda than neutral language. And certainly as someone who has been involved in much of the debate over the use of the word genocide in recent months, civilians, that sort of thing. This is, and a lawyer as well, this is really, really dangerous stuff. So today we're going to talk to Dan Curry, who is the man for this. He is, as I understand it, the director of the Language Watch project, or managing it. He'll tell us some more detail. Dan, welcome to the show. Nice to meet you.
Well, it's great to be here, Ron. I appreciate all you do for the cause.
Well, I appreciate being appreciated, let me tell you, and I appreciate Language Watch. So, first, what's your story? How does a regular person find himself getting involved in such a cool project?
Well, I have kind of a varied background. I was a journalist for the first part of my career. I was an investigative journalist. And then back when there was journalism, back when we presented both sides of stories and we didn't ignore obvious stories and we didn't become a tool for one party, those were the days. But anyway, I got out of that and became a government spokesman for the state of Illinois, as a spokesman for the Attorney General's office for 8 years. And then,
except you were identified as that rather than like being with the Sun Times or the Tribune,
right.
and merely being that with a different title. Going to your previous point,
Exactly. We didn't have to worry about those kinds of complications. We just told it like it was. And then I went to work for the U.S. Senate, and I worked for a U.S. senator as the communications director, Peter Fitzgerald, who preceded Barack Obama in Illinois. And then went on my own started my own business, and then joined with someone else, a partner, a guy named John Pearman, and we were partners for 13, 14 years. And one of our clients, we helped start Restoration PAC in 2015 as consultants, and then it's grown to one of the largest conservative organizations in America. And at some point, a couple of years ago, John and I decided to go full time with Restoration of America. Restoration PAC was the original organization, and the umbrella group is Restoration of America. We have various subgroups as well. So, it's a great organization. Founded by Doug Truax, who ran for U.S. Senate in 2014 in Illinois as a political newcomer. He's an entrepreneur, very good entrepreneur. And he was frustrated by the fact that newcomers like himself couldn't get funding. So our original purpose was to help promising newcomers in the political process and help fund them. And we've evolved into doing a lot of other things. So, and Language Watch we started it this year. And as far as why we started it, I think you touched on it. The left is actively stealing our language. And it may take conservatives we may be a little slow on the uptake to realize this. They've been doing this for a long time. But the critical mass is kind of hit us in the head, and we realized the last couple of elections, the left doesn't even argue on the issues anymore. All they do is they create all these buzz phrases, and they go from buzz phrase to buzz phrase, these propaganda phrases, and they use that to delegitimize us, to call us names, to label things something different than they are, and therefore they have altered the battlefield and tilted it in their favor. And it's all because they have hijacked the language, and we're going along with it. Not only conservatives, but people in the middle and the institutions. And so we just said, we've got to fight back against this, because this is a deadly threat to us. Because if they are able to set the terms of battle, it's like starting a baseball game down 4-0 every game in the first inning, and we can't do that. So we've got to level the playing field. So that's what we're trying to do.
I love the idea that we've all learned on Twitter, you're a writer,
right?
The power of concise writing. Right. And concise content, which something obviously that transfers to other social media, such as Twitter as well, but also Instagram and TikTok. You kept this. This is 1 minute and 2 seconds. These are all very short videos, and even though there's so much more you can say, you said the essence, and hopefully you pop the bubble. You make people realize that they're using terminology, or they're accepting the use of terminology, that hasn't earned the meaning that is being assigned to it.
Exactly. And that we spent a lot of time thinking through the actual format of this before we started. And, we debated the length of the video. We debated the format of the video. And so what we settled on is, we don't want to debate in 1 minute. We don't want to debate the issue per se. We want to tell people that the actual phrase being used is loaded and propagandistic. And here's why it is loaded and propagandistic. Now, we touch on the issue, but what we're really trying to do is open the eyes of people that may not. These phrases become so normalized in our culture because they're echoed by all the institutions and by the media, that a lot of people, we believe in the middle, and even on our side, don't really realize that the phrase they're using is loaded. Sometimes it may be so obvious that they realize it, but some of these phrases, this denier, there's election denier, there's denier this, denier that. That is, it's an insidious language, really, because it is implicating the Holocaust denier. That's where this came from, obviously. And it's just a way to call you a name and label you and therefore disqualify you from being a legitimate person to talk about the issue.
Although
And so
it came through climate denier. That
exactly,
was,
exactly, exactly. And, we did one on climate change, which is, I think, a good one because, climate change started out to be global warming. And there was a period there where the planet wasn't warming. So they said, this is too narrow. No, so the other part of this is we have a small team, including myself, of writers who put these scripts together. And we have a round table and we decide the topics. And we really debate the scripts. We have people that are very experienced writers and we tear each other apart. We have people, like-minded people, but everybody thinks of these things differently. And we have a strict we're trying to make these all very tight. And like I said, arguing about the phrase and why it's propagandistic and not a 1 minute debate on the issue, because that's a different format and a different, Prager University does these, is one of the inspirations for the whole series. They do videos on the actual issues. They do 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and they usually have the subject expert, presenting. And that's a little bit different format. And but one thing that we did copy in terms of them, we wanted these phrases to be phrases that are in use now and are probably going to be in use for months or years to come. So we want these videos as we continue to pump them out to be reference material, just like PragerU is, where you might all of a sudden be interested in an issue that you weren't interested before, and you might stumble upon a PragerU video on that issue. It's still relevant, even it might be 2 or 3 years old, because it's kind of timeless. And so these things have we think are going to be relevant, months and years into the future.
In other words, you'll archive them, presumably on this page.
Exactly. And we just started in late March, I believe we launched these, and we're putting a new one out every 2 weeks. We have about 10 already done that we have not released yet. And so we're always going to have we're going to be ahead of the game. And
that's great.
So we have, and I can preview some of the ones that we have coming up. So we've done 6 so far. The ones we've done are gun violence, climate change, abortion rights, book bans, election denier, gender affirming care. And the next 6 are carbon pollution, social justice, systemic racism, diversity, voter suppression, your truth. Those are the next 6.
Your truth.
Yeah. That's kind of and then we have others coming up like conspiracy theory, misinformation, equity.
Misinformation. That's probably where Grace and I launched into the discussion that ended up, because misinformation is one of my favorites, and I've discussed it on a lot of different platforms. In my view, it's meant to allude to disinformation, which is a purposeful, strategic, and usually transnational use
right.
of a term it meant to deceive people, and it's combined, my observation here, with a person can be misinformed.
Right.
They've got the wrong information, but until this neologism, there was no such thing as misinformation.
Right.
You could be mistaken and you could be misinformed, but the idea that there is something called misinformation, and it's interesting to me that they didn't just call it disinformation, which would go like it leaves room for you to be mistaken and not
Ex-
be, not be a Russian spy.
Right. You're exactly right. There were most people probably don't know the difference between the two, but the disinformation is uh, intent to deceive kind of thing. And like you said, it has background in the spy, the spy agencies and so forth. And misinformation is a more generic term that was kind of coined by PR people on the left, basically. I think, and when Trump came along, it became highly popularized because, they wanted to be able to say they didn't want to include the other side in their stories. As a former reporter, this stuff is pretty offensive to me because I wrote stories for a number of years, and uh, we had to include the other side, even if we didn't believe the other side. We had to include both sides, at least summarize what both sides were saying about things. But now in stories, reporters aren't doing that. They have come up with justifications to say, "Oh, we don't have to do that because both sides. It's not fair to include both sides because both sides are not legitimate. So therefore, we're going to label. We're going to say this side says this, but it's without evidence or it's misinformation."
Without evidence, this is
That,
something
yeah,
never, you as a journalist, never before was it ever suggested that journalists should weigh in not only in the text of a story, but in the headline. Trump makes claims without evidence.
right.
X, Y. That's so utterly insane. Can you imagine if they applied that to Bill Clinton or Hillary
Yeah.
Clinton? I'm just going back, to before the wars when it was just merely harsh politics without evidence. What is what you're doing going to be able to make a difference at this point? I mean, these ticks, these habits, these new sort of non-standard journalistic standards seem to have really set into place. Is it too little, too late, or is it going to be enough? What do you think?
Well, I would say we are late. Conservatives in general are late to the game on this.
Let's stick a not even
Yeah.
stick a pin. I want to interrupt you again
Yeah.
because I actually meant to interrupt you the first time, and I was
Right.
too polite for our own good. Why are conservatives late? I have my own theory, but I want to hear what you say.
I would say that conservatives are naive a little bit. They think that the truth will win out, and that we don't have to fight 24/7 round the clock because we're right. We have the truth on our side. But the flaw in that theory is that the other side is fighting round the clock, 24/7, and they are working to undermine us around the clock. And if we just weigh in every 4 years and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to throw a few things out there and we'll win out because the truth will come forward," the truth is getting smothered, and it's the permanent campaign. They used to talk about that 20, 30 years ago, but it's truly a permanent campaign with this big network of left-wing dark money and these NGOs and all these groups that are formed to do specific tasks. And one of the tasks is language. I mean, they're on Wikipedia. They're in
Oh,
diction.
Wikipedia, forget it.
Yeah, Wikipedia. They're in dictionaries. They're changing. Dictionaries are all online now,
Right.
and they're changing dictionaries in real time. I mean, there was a guy on Twitter that had a thread. I'm not sure who this is, but I noted it. A guy named Wokel Distance, and
Yeah, I haven't seen Vocal Distance in a while. I remember that.
yeah, and he just had a thread the other day, and it's just right on point here. And I'm just going to read this one tweet of his. This was in a series of tweets. What you are seeing in all these cases is an example of narrative warfare. Specifically, it is a form of discursive dialectical warfare that seeks to try to win a social and political conflict by altering, changing, and shaping the meaning of the terms and concepts in play. And then later in the thread, he said, very few people on the conservative side understand the degree to which the language matters. And he goes on and he notes that, in the Alito matter with the flag and everything, they're changing, Wikipedia in real time in the dictionary. They're changing definitions of what the flag, that whatever that flag was,
Yep.
that obscure. They're actually changing it in dictionaries and Wikipedia, in real time to coincide with the left's argument on an issue, the left's operation, basically. And the one area which I can really relate to in terms of the language is the AP style book, which I'm sure you're aware of. But as an ex-journalist, that was our Bible. So that was our Bible. I mean, we went to that anytime we had a question on how to phrase something on some issue.
Right.
And how to be fair about the issue, we went to the AP style book. And by and large, back in the day, so to speak, it was not that left leaning. It probably slightly had a left lean, but it was not blatantly left leaning at all. And in recent years, in the last, basically since Trump, but I'm not exactly sure, as AP has kind of started to go out of business, and then they've been taking all this left-wing funding now, which they never used to. Their style book, and I just got a copy of it. I just ordered one because I hadn't seen one for like 20 years. And it is unbelievable. And we have some content coming out on, what they've done to climate and gender and abortion, all these issues. They have put bizarre leftist concoctions of the language and ratified them as being legitimate. And that stuff never happened before. I mean, I remember I was raised a Democrat. My family was my mother raised me, and she was a Democrat.
Where'd you grow up?
In St. Louis, Missouri suburbs. And but it was more like like a conservative Democrat, like the John F.
A
Kennedy.
moderate Democrat, a Hubert Humphrey Democrat.
Right, exactly. And when I was a journalist for a while, I was still kind of a Democrat. And I remember one time I turned in a story, and my editor, and I worked at this place called the Daily Herald, a suburban daily in Chicago, really good paper at the time, one of the largest suburban papers in the country. And he sent it back to me and he said, this construction that you have here is a little loaded. And I did not even realize it. And he was right. And it was not a left-right thing, but I was actually putting forth a construction that was slightly loaded against the right. And I didn't even realize it. And when he pointed it out to me, I said, oh, yeah, I do see that. I didn't see that before. I mean, that was the kind of integrity that we used to have in journalism. We cared about that kind of stuff, even though even though the newsroom was definitely left leaning, people were not, they took their, journalistic independence very seriously, and they did not want to be in the tank for one side or the other. And so the AP style book, anyway, that's being used by newsrooms across the country, and it has completely been taken over by the left.
Historically, though, In other words, we have this conception of a golden age of journalism, which we all know is a little bit overblown. Walter
Right.
Cronkite was made editorial choices, and the Times, New York Times, and most major newspapers have always. But 100 years ago, there were all these newspapers, and they were really clearly, explicitly partisan. In fact, one of the features of the New York Times and I suppose other papers in other places. I'm a New Yorker, so that's my frame of reference.
Right.
Was we largely stand above this. We're not part of any particular empire, but you had not even they were broadsheets, but they were explicitly, you had like pro-labor and anti-labor, and it was very explicit. But then you had this media consolidation that took place in the middle of the 20th century. And there seemed to have been a sense among the major outlets, including the TV and radio, that they had a sort of trust-like responsibility to be neutral in a way that had not necessarily existed, 50 years earlier. But they've now drawn on that equity, as I always like to put it.
Another one of our videos coming up too, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, equity.
Well, equity in a different, not equity in the sense of
No,
fairness, equity in
no,
the
I
sense
know.
of stored value.
Right.
As I mean, I think at this point, the bloom is off the rose. No one is under, only people who are hopelessly deluded believe that major media brands, which is what they are fair brokers, are neutral reporters about anything.
Right.
So who are you trying to, who's your audience with these videos?
Well, it's across the board. And I would say ultimately we hope to open the eyes of a few people in the middle that might not be that want to be fair politically. They may lean one way or the other, but by and large, I talk to people all the time that are on the other side. And when I ask them about issues, they spit back information that I know is completely from leftist publications, and it includes a lot of things that are just flat out false and built upon these phrases that we're talking about here. And they just don't. I don't think they even realize the extent to which they're just drinking from a polluted well, basically. And so I think we just want to we're not under any illusion that we're going to change things overnight, but we when one of these phrases hits somebody and they go, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I didn't realize that phrase was loaded." I mean, it's obvious now when I see it. When you see it, when somebody points it out to you, it's like a picture when there's like a little dot in the picture or something, you don't see it. And then all of a sudden they point it out to you, you go, "Oh my God, how did I miss that?" So that's what we hope will happen. We also, I hold out some hope, and I may be completely wrong in this, but, and it used to be true among journalists. They used to correct things back when I was, after I got out of journalism and I was on the government side, and I would interact with journalists all the time. When they crossed the line on something and we pointed it out to them, in a very factual basis, and we were right on it, a lot of times they would say, even begrudgingly, they would say, "Yeah, I see your point, and we'll do a correction, or we won't do that again. We won't do that kind of narrative again because you're right. That's not a fair way to state it." And so we did have an impact, but I think, as the media fell apart financially, started to fall apart financially, and then Trump came along and he broke, pretty much everything in this country in terms of one way or another. People just went crazy on the left, or so they just took that as an excuse to, we have to stop the bad, evil man, and it's justified to stop the evil man. So therefore, we'll actually build into our standards, like AP standards. We don't have to cover both sides of an issue. They have that in their style book on certain issues, that you don't have to like cover the other side of climate change, which is obviously not settled science, because, science is really never settled. And there's all kinds of scientists that think what is being said is BS. But they say we don't cover it on both sides
I
anymore.
saw one of my favorite YouTubers is a guy named Simon Whistler,
Yeah.
who I don't think is a political conservative by any stretch of the imagination. He strikes me as a moderate liberal. He's an Englishman, and he has this empire of fantastic documentary videos. And I was watching a one where he was discussing the historicity of Jesus of Nazareth, and coming out very firmly that there's a very strong consensus that, of course, he existed. And, then when you get into other details, then it gets foggier. But he cited a non-Christian historian who said that denying the historical existence of Jesus is like denying climate change. And he considered that to have been, and even Simon as well,
Yeah.
to have been quotas demonstratum. That's it. We have completely, there's nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it is. It's interesting. Just a little side road, but a guy named Lee Strobel. I don't know if you know who he is, but
Yes.
he's written a book, The Case for Christ, and a series of books proving the existence of Christ and the resurrection and so forth. And I used to work with Lee for a short period of time at the Daily Herald, the newspaper I just mentioned. He was
Yeah.
he was the smartest, most talented journalist I've ever run into by far. I mean, there's nobody even close to how talented
Wow.
he was. He was the legal affairs writer
Yeah,
for
that's probably
the,
why I know his name. Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's got I think he has a law degree from Yale, I believe. And he was a journalist in Chicago that uh, didn't like the fact that his wife had, found religion. And so he set out to disprove her religion, Christianity. And after 2 years, he said, well, actually, it's true. So, and then he left journalism and so forth. But yeah, you're right. It's there's all kinds of things in quote in science, evolution, the issue of evolution, the language that's twisted there. There's all kinds of things. And when your eyes are finally open, I came at it from the other point of view, where I accepted certain things were just true, and then I started to look into a few of them, and I go, well, that's not true. And I go, well, if that's not true, maybe something else isn't true. And then I kept looking into them, and it's like, pretty much the whole thing on the left is a house of cards.
But see, I think to a large extent, part of the problem here is we do as a culture have certain things that we say we're not going to debate these anymore.
Right.
And going back to the beginning of our discussion, the Holocaust is one of those.
Exactly.
So there's this whole movement of I'm just asking questions. What's wrong with asking questions? And you can't intellectually say, well, you can't ask questions. And once that there's the power of cultural consensus is broken, and it wasn't Donald Trump may have been the last straw for it, but the problem is we have it's a very common thing in the law and in journalism, and you see this all the time at press conferences, when a question is not a question.
Right.
A question is a statement. People
Right.
who doubt the historical truth of the Holocaust are not just asking questions. They're making statements. You do have to be prepared to engage people on every question. But when you find that they're not accepting rational quality evidence.
Right.
Yeah, I visited the death camps, but that was all a Hollywood production. Like there's a point at which you're not having a good faith argument.
Right.
That's the challenge that we face now, because we're the Palestine and Israel, the Gaza Strip stuff, literally the things that people are prepared to say and put their names on, forget the anonymous stuff, is mind-boggling. Is there any thought with your project to go beyond the 1 minute videos and do something, either work in a different medium, maybe, I don't know, billboards or print? I think print advertising is pretty much dead, but other media or large or longer form kinds of or
Yeah,
you just one step at a time?
I think we want to get this established, this concept, so people understand. Like I said, we're going to be putting them out once every 2 weeks, and cumulatively, we're uh, across the spectrum of a bunch of different issues, and so uh, an issue that you might care about more than others, hopefully you'll run into one of our videos and maybe explore the others. Like I said, people's eyes get open after a while, and we're in this period now of was it they call it red pill? The young people call it red pill. But the for example, this is you just mentioned the Israel Gaza thing, the Trump prosecution thing. So you have these people in the media who are pumping this narrative that Trump is going to come in and he's going to go after everybody. He's going to prosecute his political opponents. At the same time, in real time, putting Trump in, trying to put him in prison. Today, Steve Bannon is on his way to prison. The lack of it's like lack of self-awareness is just.
No, I don't. There's no lack of self-awareness. It's cognitive dissonance.
Right.
So they're aware, but they're not aware. It's not. There's a cell wall, a brain barrier that doesn't allow, because you're right. It is a kind of lack of self-awareness, because they can't really be waking up this morning and saying, "Today I'm going to lie. Today I'm going to pretend to be offended by the idea of political prosecutions."
Right.
No one can live like that. Nazis, I mean, we're talking about really, really wicked people. They're not the people you used to work with in the newsrooms, and most of them are probably out of the business by now, but they're not that kind of evil people, are they? Are they?
No, they are. That's the difference, because when Trump said enemy of the people about the media, I wouldn't have thought that years ago when I was in journalism, but I actually believe it now because of what you just said. They know, back in the day, like when this was going on, we would have a press conference and we would say, hey, the other side is saying we're going to prosecute our political opponents, but they are doing X, Y, and Z right now. And the media would cover it, and they would actually give that counter argument credence and go to the other side and ask them, hey, aren't you being hypocritical here? They would do that. There was some back and forth. But now the left is just saying Trump is going to go after his political opponents. The left decided that's a good message to put out there. They focus grouped it or whatever. They just tell it to the media, and the media just repeats it, and they don't ask them any questions about it. It's just, so it's not journalism anymore. So therefore, I do believe they are the enemy of the people, because they're not my friend. They're not doing their job. Their job is to inform us, not to sway us or propagandize us. And so they're not doing their job, in my opinion. And I used to be in the industry, so I think I have a little bit of credibility to speak about it.
Dan, you have a great deal of credibility, and I hope you'll continue doing what you're doing. I want to talk to you more about helping to get the message out. Yeah, this is one of those love fest episodes, guys. Okay, I love what these guys are doing. I want to promote what they're doing. This is a project that's near and dear to me because I don't know if you guys have picked up on this. I'm a words guy. I'm a language guy, and again, it is even in a slightly different sense, but it goes back to trademark law and free speech, and it is a theft of our entire culture. It's not merely, a propaganda technique. They're removing meaning from the way we understand the world and each other, and anything you guys can do. And by the way, let them come back with well thought out rebuttals. They won't. They won't.
Exactly.
What they'll do is try to is minimize your SEO,
Right.
push
Exactly.
you down in the Google rankings, and try to prevent try to prevent you from being as effectual as Prager you.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for, to listen to podcasts like yours and spread them around, and to use alternate platforms like Free Spoke and Rumble. And we have to give those platforms, we have to, and to not spend money with leftist corporations that are giving leftists all kinds of money. We just can't do it. We have to fight back, and we all have a role to play. And if we continue to chip away at this, it's going to break through. I do believe that the truth will come out. I do think a lot of people their eyes are being opened by some of the overreach by the left on some of these issues that are so obvious to people, and they're doing it in so many different areas that it touches on some area that you're involved in. You say, "Oh my gosh, I was a Democrat my whole life, but I can't countenance this." This is not what I believe in.
School boards. What's going on at school board meetings.
Right.
Right is left and left is right and black is white and white is black. It
Yeah.
can't go on like this.
No, you're absolutely true. Correct. And thank you for highlighting what we're doing, and we will highlight what you're doing. And
Thanks.
we gotta work together. So it's
Amen.
great.
Dan, great talking to you.
All right. You too. God bless.